A narcissist can survive losing an argument. They can survive losing a relationship. They can even survive being exposed. But there is one thing they are far less prepared to face. The moment the identity they built to protect themselves stops working, that is where the collapse begins, and it rarely looks the way people expect. You may imagine them completely destroyed, alone, finally admitting everything they did. But narcissistic collapse can be much more deceptive. They may look stronger, colder, happier. They may suddenly replace you, reinvent themselves, flood social media with proof of their perfect life, or tell everyone that losing you was the best thing that ever happened to them. But sometimes the louder the performance becomes, the more desperately it is protecting something underneath. Because for years, their sense of power may have depended on controlling the story. They were desirable, superior, untouchable, always wanted, always right. Then reality delivers something they cannot negotiate with. Someone stops chasing them. Someone sees through the manipulation. Someone they thought would always return closes the door. Their usual tactics stop producing the same response. And suddenly, the image they created collides with evidence that contradicts it. This is where the internal pressure starts building. They may search desperately for new attention. They may become obsessed with proving that they have won. They may attack the person who exposed the weakness. They may rewrite the entire relationship until they become the victim and you become the villain. But none of those performances necessarily resolve what happened underneath. The false sense of superiority has been wounded. And when external validation can no longer repair that wound quickly enough, the cracks become harder to hide. Anger can become desperation. Confidence can become paranoia. Indifference can become obsession. The person who once acted as though you were disposable may suddenly become consumed with proving that you meant nothing. And that contradiction is the first clue. Because when someone truly means nothing to you, you do not need to destroy their reputation, provoke their jealousy, monitor their life, or convince the world that you won. The collapse begins when the narcissist can no longer maintain the image without constantly feeding it. And what happens when that image finally starts falling apart is much darker than simply losing control. Because now they are not only losing power over you, they are beginning to lose the version of themselves that needed that power to survive. The first thing that begins to disappear during narcissistic collapse is not their confidence. It is their ability to control what other people see. For years, they may have survived by carefully managing perception. They know when to appear charming, when to become vulnerable, when to withdraw, when to punish, and when to return with exactly enough affection to pull someone back into the cycle. Their power does not come only from controlling people. It comes from controlling the meaning of everything that happens. If they hurt you, you were too sensitive. If they betrayed you, you pushed them away. If they disappeared, they needed space. If you finally walked away, suddenly you abandoned them. Every event is rewritten until reality protects their ego. But collapse begins when reality becomes harder to rewrite. Maybe you stop defending yourself. Maybe you stop explaining. Maybe you no longer react when they provoke you. Maybe people around them begin noticing the contradictions. Maybe someone they discarded refuses to return. Whatever triggers it, something terrifying happens inside their psychological system. Their usual methods stop producing the expected result, And that is when the behavior often becomes more intense. They may suddenly contact you after weeks or months of silence. They may manufacture an emergency. They may become unusually affectionate. They may accuse you of things they themselves have done. They may display a new relationship publicly and aggressively, hoping you will see it. They may tell mutual friends a distorted version of what happened. None of these behaviors guarantee collapse by themselves, but together they can reveal something important: a desperate attempt to restore control over the narrative. Because control is not simply about dominating another person, it is about protecting the identity they cannot afford to question. If you no longer see them as powerful, desirable, superior, or indispensable, they may try to force you back into the old role. They want the reaction because the reaction tells them they still matter. Your anger proves they can still reach you. Your jealousy proves they still have value. Your explanation proves they still control your attention. Even your hatred can become useful because hatred still creates emotional connection. But when you become genuinely unreachable, not pretending, not playing games, not using silence as punishment, but simply no longer emotionally participating, the entire mechanism begins starving. Suddenly, they cannot confirm their importance through you. And that is why indifference can hit harder than confrontation. You are no longer fighting inside the reality they created. You have stepped outside of it. Now they face something they desperately tried to avoid. They cannot control how you see them anymore. And once that control disappears, the mask has to work harder just to remain intact. Then comes the part most people misunderstand. When the narcissist realizes the old methods are failing, they do not necessarily surrender. They escalate. The charm becomes more intense. The accusations become more extreme. The victim's story becomes more dramatic. The attempts to provoke you become more obvious. Why? Because they are searching for proof that they still have access to your emotions. They may send a message designed to make you angry. They may suddenly apologize for something they refuse to acknowledge for years. They may appear with promises of change, memories of the good times, or words you once desperately wanted to hear. And if tenderness does not work, they can switch directions completely. Coldness, contempt, smear campaigns, jealousy games, a new partner displayed like a trophy. Anything capable of producing a reaction becomes valuable. This is where many people make a dangerous mistake. They interpret the intensity as evidence of love. They think, if they are trying this hard, maybe they finally understand what they lost. But intensity is not the same as attachment, and desperation is not the same as love. Sometimes what they are desperately trying to recover is not you, it is the psychological position they once occupied in your life. They want to know they can still disturb your peace. They want confirmation that one message can still ruin your night, that one photograph can still make you jealous, that one accusation can still force you to defend yourself. Because the moment you react, the old system comes alive again. They push, you respond, they withdraw, you chase clarity, they return, you feel relief, and suddenly they are back at the center of your emotional world. But imagine what happens when none of it works. The message arrives, and you do not collapse. The provocation appears, and you do not defend yourself. They display someone new, and you do not compete. They rewrite the story, and you no longer spend hours trying to correct it. That is when the external battle begins turning inward. The narcissist can replace a person. They can invent another story. They can search for another source of attention. But there is one thing they cannot easily escape: the growing evidence that their power was never absolute. It depended on participation, your participation. And when that disappears, the fantasy of control begins cracking. This is where the collapse can become psychologically brutal, because underneath the performance, there may be shame, insecurity, emptiness, and a fragile sense of self that external validation was helping hold together. The person who seemed completely certain of themselves can suddenly become restless, furious, obsessed, withdrawn, or desperate for new attention. Not because you destroyed them, because you stopped helping them maintain the illusion that they could control you. And this is where the collapse becomes visible. Not always as screaming, not always as rage. Sometimes it looks much darker than that. The narcissist begins losing control of the image they worked so hard to protect. The confidence becomes unstable. The charm becomes forced. The superiority starts looking like desperation. They may become obsessed with what you are doing, who you are talking to, whether you have moved on, whether you still think about them. They may watch from a distance, search for information through other people, or suddenly reappear with a completely different personality. But underneath every strategy is the same question: do I still have power over you? And when the answer keeps coming back as no, something begins to break. Because control was never just about controlling your behavior. It was about controlling the reflection they received from you. Your fear made them feel powerful. Your confusion made them feel important. Your need for answers kept them relevant. Your emotional reactions confirmed that they could still enter your mind whenever they wanted. Remove those reactions, and they are forced to confront something they spent years avoiding: themselves. That confrontation can be unbearable. So instead of looking inward, they may attack outward. Suddenly, you are cruel, you are selfish, you changed, you betrayed them, you abandoned them. They rewrite the entire relationship until they become the victim, and you become the monster. This is not random. If they can convince themselves that you are the problem, they do not have to face the possibility that their own behavior drove you away. And if they can convince other people too, even better. Every person who believes their version becomes another mirror protecting the identity that is cracking underneath. But there is a limit to how long that illusion can survive when reality keeps contradicting it. You are not returning. You are not begging. You are not competing. You are not explaining yourself anymore. And that is when the narcissist may begin searching frantically for replacement attention. New relationships, new admirers, new conflicts, new people to impress. Anything that can restore the feeling of significance they once extracted from controlling your emotional world. From the outside, it may look like they moved on instantly. But moving on and replacing a source of validation are not the same thing. The speed itself can reveal the desperation, because silence leaves them alone with something they desperately want to escape. The realization that the person they once controlled can now look at them and feel nothing. No fear, no need, no fascination. And for someone whose power depended on remaining psychologically important to you, your indifference can feel like the final destruction of the role they once played in your life. But eventually, Even replacement attention can fail to solve the deeper problem. A new person can admire them. A new relationship can make them feel desirable. A new audience can applaud the version of themselves they want the world to see. For a while, it may look as if the collapse never happened. They may appear happier, stronger, even transformed. And if you are still watching from a distance, this can be the moment that hurts the most. You may think, maybe I really was the problem. Look how perfect they are without me. But appearances can hide a very different reality. New validation can distract from an internal wound, but distraction is not transformation. If the underlying need for control, admiration, and emotional dominance remains untouched, the same instability eventually follows them into the next dynamic. Because the real problem was never simply losing you. It was what losing you revealed. Someone they believed they could always influence became unreachable. Someone whose emotions once responded predictably stopped responding. Someone they thought would always return discovered they could survive without them. That realization cannot be erased by posting a photograph, finding another partner, or convincing another group of people that they are extraordinary. And this is where the collapse can become quieter and more corrosive. They may compare new people to you. They may become increasingly demanding of admiration. They may need stronger reactions to feel the same sense of power. They may become bitter when attention fades, restless when someone sets a boundary, or furious when the new person begins seeing the contradictions you eventually saw. The cycle does not repeat because every narcissist follows an identical script. It repeats when the underlying pattern remains unchanged. And beneath that pattern is a painful contradiction. They desperately need external validation while wanting to believe they need nobody. They want complete control while pretending they are completely indifferent. They want to be admired without admitting how deeply they depend on admiration. The harder they protect that contradiction, the more exhausting the performance becomes. And eventually, there may be nowhere left to run except toward another person, another audience, another conflict, another version of the same story. But none of those escapes can change what already happened between you and them. You saw behind the mask. You stopped responding to the performance. And most importantly, you survived the moment they once convinced you would destroy you, losing them. That is why the deepest part of narcissistic collapse is not necessarily watching them fall apart in front of you. It is knowing that somewhere beneath every new performance exists a reality they cannot rewrite. You discovered that their power over you was never permanent. And now we reach the part that matters most. Because if you spend your entire healing process waiting to watch the narcissist collapse, they still occupy the center of your emotional world. You are still watching, still measuring, still hoping for evidence that they are suffering enough to compensate for what they did to you. But the final stage of this story is not their destruction. It is the moment you no longer need to witness it. Maybe they fall apart privately. Maybe they immediately find someone new. Maybe they spend years protecting the same false image. Maybe they never admit what happened at all. None of that changes what they lost when they lost control over you. They lost the ability to make one cold message destroy your night. They lost the ability to disappear and know you would chase them. They lost the ability to make you question your own reality simply because they denied it. They lost the version of you that believed their approval determined your worth. And that loss cannot be repaired by replacing you, attacking you, blaming you, or pretending you never mattered. Because the person they once knew how to control no longer exists. You changed. You saw the pattern. You learned what the silence meant. You learned what the sudden affection meant. You learned why the accusations appeared exactly when you started becoming stronger. And once you see the machinery behind the performance, the illusion can never have exactly the same power again. This is the truth they cannot hide from forever. Control was never proof of strength. It was proof of dependence. They needed your reaction to feel powerful. They needed your confusion to stay important. They needed your fear of losing them to keep you trapped. And when you stopped providing those things, the structure began collapsing under its own weight. So don't waste your freedom trying to watch them suffer. Don't reopen the door just to see whether they regret losing you. Don't monitor their new life, hoping to discover cracks in the performance. Walk away from the stage entirely. Because the most devastating ending for a relationship built around control is not revenge. It is irrelevance. If this video helped you understand what happens when a narcissist finally begins to break, subscribe to The Inner Shadow, like the video, and share it with someone who is still trying to escape this cycle. And tell me in the comments, what changed inside you when you finally stopped needing their reaction? Because the moment you stop watching the narcissist collapse is often the moment you realize something far more important. You are finally rebuilding yourself.